As you heard Kaya say, the President Ramaphosa this week undertakes a state visit to Qatar for 2 days of talks between both governments. Both countries have enjoyed 3 decades of diplomatic relations, and these meetings will include senior business engagements. Sophie Mokoena, our SABC News International Editor, joins us now for more. Sophie, good afternoon. What has kept this relationship going for so long?
I think it's because these countries made a commitment 3 decades ago that they will continue to work together. You know that President Mandela, including President Mbeki, President Zuma, have been to Qatar, and therefore the relationship is continuing. Even now, post their tenure, the former presidents are still visiting that country, which speaks to the relationship between Qatar and South Africa. But of course, this will be President Cyril Ramaphosa's first visit to that country in the Gulf region.
Well, last year, Qatar became South Africa's 5th largest trading partner in the Middle East. We've got exports to that country valued at around $206 million, imports at $252 million. What is our trade founded on, and what does South Africa need to do to begin to bridge that trade deficit?
I think the deficit, it's not so bad in terms of doing business between the two countries, because when you look at the figures, you find that for South Africa, the export to Qatar, it's $206 million US. And when you look at Qatar, it's 252 million. And therefore, it's not as bad as some of these relationships that you have. And therefore, I think the president, with this visit, he can be able to narrow the gap. And obvious, the issue of petroleum will feature high on the agenda, including agriculture. And because the Minister of Agriculture will be there, and that speaks to we can export some products from South Africa, agricultural products. You also have the Minister of Minerals and Energy who will be there. And therefore, you can have a better relationship in terms of improving the trade relation between the two countries.
A lot of potential there, as you say, Sophie, to close that $50 million or so gap. What's interesting, and you talked about agriculture, energy, manufacturing, that is a sector that many experts say is underutilized in South Africa. And it is also a place where obvious and sustainable growth can come from, even with small investments. Are you hearing anything about that?
Well, of course, you know, when you listen to what President Ramaphosa has been saying, and some of the leaders on the continent, they're talking about when you invest on the continent and you want to do business with Africans, you have to ensure that you are able to assist Africa to have capacity in relation to manufacturing. And that is why the president was talking about, rather than taking these raw resources or mineral resources, come and establish factories and companies here where you can beneficiate and send the product fully completed, because there you have a better value chain. And therefore, I think these are some of the issues that will be on the table.
The Deputy President, as Kai has been sharing, also coming back from Saudi Arabia, he's given us an update on the Israel-Hamas war and Saudi Arabia's position on it. From your perspective, watching all of these developments together, the totality of South Africa's representation in the Mideast, the position that as a government we have taken, what else has been noteworthy about these visits?
I think this one is very important. You know that it was in 2020 where Qatar was able to mediate between the United States of America and the Taliban, and we since had that agreement that was called the Doha Accord, and it was in 2020 where you saw that Americans leaving Afghanistan, and therefore Qatar is quite good at negotiating. Now the president is going there at a time where you have this problem in the Middle East, in Gaza in particular, and you know that you have hostages there in Gaza after what transpired on the 7th of October. And I think the Qatar is currently involved in negotiating that the hostages be released. And therefore, I think the president will emphasize that, because when you look at issues on the agenda, the geopolitics are going to dominate the talks also in relation to the war in Ukraine, the current war in Gaza. And I think it will be a diplomatic coup if the negotiations around the release of these hostages in Gaza can happen at a time where the president is in the Middle East. And therefore, we know that the minister is already there. As we speak today, she is about to address a meeting of foreign affairs ministers of the Gulf region and the Middle East. And these are the issues that are going to dominate her speech. And therefore, I think this comes at a time where President Ramaphosa can be able to engage his counterpart in terms of pushing that Hamas does release the hostages. And you know that you have leaders of Hamas in Qatar, and therefore the negotiations are likely to happen. And President Ramaphosa being there at this crucial moment, you know, he did the same with Ukraine and the Russia conflict, where he went to both countries to demonstrate South Africa's position in terms of a free and a very peaceful world. And I think this is a moment for the president also to emphasize to Doha that you really have to push as people who are good in relation to negotiations to bring peace in that enclave, and also to ensure that hostages are released.
Sophie Mokoena, we will watch together how those talks and that address by our foreign, our international relations minister pans out, and we'll bring you those highlights as soon as they are available. Our SABC News International Editor, Sophie Mokoena. On that note, we take a breath, as will you. Enjoy these messages, and we'll be back straight after.